The first question. I like to read from my handphone while sitting on the toilet bowl. It's a nice start. Now I've surrendered my HP handphone. How should I deal with the loneliness? Talk to your toilet bowl. No. You know, sometimes that it's nice to actually to break our habits. Of course, you may know that because I was born in UK, that I used to always drink tea. So much so that some monks, when I was a younger monk in Thailand, they said, "Oh, Ajahn Brahm, you're addicted to tea." And so I said, "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are." "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are." So then I decided to do 3 months without having any tea at all. And 2 days later, they came up to me and said, "Ajahn Brahm, please have a cup of tea." I said, "Why? I'm enjoying it." They said, because they tried that with another English monk a couple of years earlier, and he was a pain in the butt to live with without his tea. So that really made me very, very determined. I'm not going to have a cup of tea for the whole 3 months, and I was fine. So even without your handphone, you'll be fine. You're not lonely. You're always with someone. I once spent 6 months by myself. I never saw another human being for 6 months. I never spoke to another human being for 6 months. Was I lonely? No. I was always with somebody, and that was me. I learned how to be my own best friend. And if you can be your own best friend, you're never lonely. In fact, sometimes you can spend so much lovely time just meditating, especially if you're living in nature like this beautiful place here. You can go out and see the birds flying through the sky, or you can listen to the rain hitting the roof of your building. You can see just the water running down the little creeks. You can see so much more. So don't think you've lost your handphone, you're lonely. You find even more beautiful things to look for when the handphone is not there. You don't need to read sort of quotes. You don't need to read books. You can actually see nature. See it for yourself and listen to it. There's one thing which I was kind of surprised at, that there's a couple of her books, part of the Sutta Pitaka, called the Theravada and Therigatha. These are the verses of the enlightened monks and the verses of the enlightened nuns from the time of the Buddha. And a lot of those enlightened beings would start to write poems about nature. They were nature lovers. And they used to be out in the mountains or in the forests, the jungles, and just how wonderful it was, to be free of everything else, so they could learn how to connect with the nature around them. This was a story from a monk not so long ago, maybe about 50, 60 years ago. He was a forest monk, and I think it was in Sri Lanka. And living in his little hut in the middle of the jungle, he would walk every morning for the alms food, but after getting his alms food, that was it for the day. He'd spend the rest of the day and the night in his hut in the forest. And on this occasion, that he heard something knocking on the door in the middle of the night. He wasn't scared. Instead, he opened the door, and there was a monkey knocking on the door. It was not sort of a joke. The little monkey was a mother, and it had her dead baby in her arms. And he just understood that dead baby, the mother didn't know what to do, and was grieving. She just lost her child. And she thought that the monk could have some sort of potion, or was wise enough. The monk was always kind, so the monkey would not be afraid of the monk. And so it actually handed the baby to the monk to see if the monk could do some chanting or some medicine to heal the baby. And the monk looked at it, it was dead, there's nothing he could do. So he just held it, did a little bit of chanting, then handed it back to the mother. And then the mother, which obviously sad but understood, went out of the door and went back into the forest. And I thought that was a kind of a beautiful story of what happens when you're a forest monk living by yourself. You can tend to communicate, not with words, but just with your kindness to all the other beings in the forest around you. Hand phones are not really necessary. The hand phones don't get lonely without you. So just you're exchanging one type of awareness to something much more beautiful, about the awareness of nature, the awareness of your own body and your own mind. And you have much more fun that way. Dear Ajahn, in the sutta, the Buddha said a noble disciple who was reborn in a Brahma or Suddhavasa realm will live there for tens of hundreds of eons before passing away into Parinibbana. That is such a long, long time before experiencing the Parinibbana. Yes, pretty long. I know time flies in jhana states. Actually, okay, I should finish reading it first. A few hours might feel like just minutes, but don't these devas get, what was it? Splits. Oh, sickened of jhanas. What else do they do? Do they once in a while visit other lower heavenly realms or human world to teach the Dharma, or could they commit suicide, like how some arahats did? Thank you, Ajahn. My goodness. It's a really interesting question. But if you do experience what a jhana is, it's not like time just flies. Nothing flies. Time becomes still. So it's like time doesn't have any meaning anymore. Remember, to have wanting, you need to have two of the three types of time, at least. The present and the future, the past and the present, or the past and the future. To have wanting. If I'm here and I want something, I have to have perception of the future. We have to have a perception of the past. When those perceptions of time disappear, there's no wanting, you're peaceful, you're still. And that's typical of the jhana experiences. Time's meaning changes. And it's the same in the Suddhavasa realm. This is of the non-returners. Even there, your perceptions of time are just so different than the perceptions of time you have here. Basically, time doesn't have much meaning. And it's not as if you are just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for Parinibbana. You're having a beautiful time in the Suddhavasa, one of the most highest of heavenly, of pleasurable states. And you're in and out of jhanas in those Suddhavasa. And sometimes that stillness, that peace lasts such a long time. To give you some indication, I already mentioned to you about that Vietnamese monk who entered into the deep meditation for 8 days. There was also this Indonesian monk who I got to know. I don't mind saying his name now because he has passed away. If he was still alive, I would keep that name sealed, simply because if you knew there was a monk like this, you'd go and sort of investigate and bother him. So this particular monk, Indonesian, he started off his spiritual path by going into one of the jungles in Java. Still was a few jungles in those days in Java, and he found a nice quiet place and sat down to meditate. And he wasn't a monk yet, but when he was meditating, he described the experience to me. He got very still, and then he saw like a star, come into his mind. You know what that star is? That's like a nimit. And then his English wasn't perfect. It was a second language. But I remember how he described it. He said he married that star. When I first heard that, what's he talking about? You marry a man or a woman, not a star. But that's how he described uniting with it. And then when he came out of his meditation, he didn't know how long. Time had no meaning anymore. And so when he opened his eyes and came out, he did notice it was like he was in a different place than where he started. Because the trees looked really different, and the bushes as well. He soon figured it out. There had been a flash flood there. When he checked with the villagers, he'd been underwater, a meter or two underwater in that flash flood. And so when he came out, he could actually see the damage to the trees in the forest. And it's what the villagers said. He didn't tell me how many days he'd been actually underwater in the jhana. He didn't feel anything. The body just has no five senses anymore. Just has a mind state, blissed out. And because of that, it gives an idea of how time, the perception of time, does change in these deep meditations. So you may say you're going to be blissed out in eons and eons and eons. Yes, quite likely. But it doesn't matter. You are having a wonderful time. And after you emerge from that Suddhavasa, then it's parinibbana. There's no returning to any realms of suffering. So basically, it's not a bad deal. You have the bliss for eons and eons and eons, and then when the bliss finishes, then you finish. That makes sense? I think many of you will be satisfied if at the end of this retreat that you go to Suddhavasa. And can they get like that? Always on the way to enlightenment. They can't stop it anymore, so they don't have to do anything. They get bored? No way. Can you get bored with bliss? No more bliss? Oh, no. That's a good question, though. Is it true that one should not practice samatha meditation when one has anxiety disorder or depression? No, it's not true. If samatha meditation, look, there is no difference between samatha meditation and vipassana meditation. There's only meditation. This silly idea that there's two types of meditation is how Ajahn would describe it. Sorry? Yeah, how Ajahn would describe it. He said, what can you see now? You can see the front of my hand. Now you can see the back of my hand, he would say. Like that's vipassana, that's samatha. You can only see vipassana right now. But samatha is right behind. Now you can see samatha, you can't see vipassana. Now you can kind of see both. But you can't split them. I love the way he said that they can't be separated. One may be prominent, the other one is right behind. And to make it even more clear, this was the Buddha's simile. He mentioned it in the suttas and explained it was explained more in the commentaries. Once, this is like the Buddha's time, once there was a big emperor. He had a son and he wanted to train the son in how to rule the empire when the emperor died. So instead of just teaching him, he had the great idea of, in one of the bordering kingdoms, that he would give that under total rulership to his son. So he could learn by trial and error how to rule. So he said, this little kingdom, it's a long way from where I am, but you can go up there and you can be the king there. So the son went up there, and as you may know, when you send your children overseas to study a long way from mum and dad, the first time away from home, you play around. Have you ever had any children like that? I know a few years ago, there was this, she was Malaysian, yep. And she was sent by her wealthy father over here to Perth to study. And do you think she did any studying? She was a party girl. But the problem was, she was still enrolled in university. So just a couple of weeks before the exams, she came to see me for some chanting. And I gave her some strong blessing. And then she did her exams. She failed. And her friends were going around, telling me, said she's going around saying that Ajahn Brahm is a no good monk. Her whole plan was have a good time away from home. And when it comes to exams, that's Ajahn Brahm's job. It's a job for her, so she can pass. That's totally stupid and silly. It didn't work. At least you've got to do something. So anyway, that never worked. But when this son went off to this bordering kingdom, he had so many parties, he didn't do any work. He wasn't really ruling or making any decisions. So a couple of headmen from that area, they journeyed to see the emperor and said, look, your son is not doing a good job. This little country is going from bad to worse. And so the king said, okay, I will send one of my wisest ministers to actually teach my son, the basics of rulership. So the wise minister went up to that kingdom, and when he arrived there, he said, I'm from your father, the emperor. And the emperor's son, now a king in his own right, said, I don't care who you are, go away. But I'm from your emperor. Yes, but this is my land. Go, now. The prince, or the king, the son of the emperor, would not listen to the wise minister. So the wise minister went back to see the emperor, and after many days arrived at the emperor's court and told the emperor your son won't listen to me. And that's when the emperor said, oh yes, it's my fault. So next time I'm going to send not just you, but one of the fiercest, strongest generals from my army. The two will go together, this fierce, battle-hardened soldier and the wise minister. And when they arrived at the son's kingdom, and they announced, the two of us are from your father, the emperor. And the king said again, look, I already told you, one of you, get out of here. This is my kingdom. And I've got the right to send you away. And who's the other guy? And the other guy, big fellow, took out his sword and held the sword to the king's neck and said, I am one of your father's generals. You better listen to the wise words of this minister. And the king said, I'm listening. As you would if you got a sharp sword against your neck. And so that gave the wise minister the opportunity to teach this son of an emperor. In that simile, the wise minister was called Vipassana. You don't listen to it unless you got the sharp sword of samatha holding you still. I'm listening. And that's the Buddhist simile. And samatha and vipassana always going together. Okay, next question. Crikey, so I've got to read it first. Dear Ajahn Braun, my husband and I, we are right now taking care of our granddaughter due to her parents' separation. My son, her dad, has been taking care of her for the past 3.5 years. From young, she is sent to Sunday Christian classes and under the care of our Christian auntie. Christmas is coming and she'll be attending a Christmas church service during my absence to meet Jesus as a compassionate Bodhisattva Deva. She'll be schooling in my hometown next semester. I intend to enroll her for Buddhist Dharma classes or Suchi Association for her Sundays. I hope she'll be exposed to Buddhism. When she grows up, it will be her choice to choose what religion. Am I doing right? I used to go to church, Christian church. When I was growing up, I didn't know any Buddhists. And after a while, can I be honest? I rejected Christianity, but I still went to church. You know why? Because I sang in the church choir. I had a good voice, believe it or not. And my father was very poor. And if you sang in the church choir on Saturdays, there were always weddings. And I was always volunteer to sing at the weddings in the church. And where I came from, it was called a nice little earner. They would give you tips. And I soon learned how to, I was only a young boy, maybe 11 years of age or 12. You'd look at the bride, really sweet. And she'd always give you a big tip. That's what I said. And that's the only reason I went there, because it was a good earner for me, because I didn't have much pocket money, hardly any pocket money, because my father was very sick and very poor. So I enjoyed that. It's not very I'm being honest with you, that's why I went there. But anyhow, later on, that yes, please let them choose. One of the things which we advise, if you are a sort of mixed marriage, different religions, different paths, or no paths at all, or what we do in the West when we get two Buddhists bringing up a kid, what should we teach them? The thing we always advise is teach them, number one, to be honest, and number two, to ask questions. And it's kind of, you get sort of bothered by answering all these questions from little kids, but please bear with it and answer the questions as best you can. Because if you encourage your children to ask questions and be honest, if they're not satisfied with the answers they get, they will reject it and they'll keep asking another question. Their honesty and their questioning will be their path so they can find out the truth for themselves, especially what path, what religion to follow. And I thought that was a beautiful answer. You don't want to brainwash your children. The best thing to do is to encourage your children to investigate, and the honesty will safeguard them believing in stupid things. Whatever that is, whatever religion you call it. And the questioning will keep them searching, give them the tools to keep on going until they find the truth for themselves. Honesty and questioning. That's the same for each one of you as well. I think you don't need to be too challenged, by the fact that you are sending them to a Christian school, because many people in the West, they go to Christian schools and they, please excuse me, but they find out it doesn't make any sense for them. And so they turn to something else. But, anyway, was Jesus a Buddhist? There is lots of circumstantial, but convince me. Number one, did you know the story of Jesus? Yeah. One of those stories was that his mum and dad had to flee Palestine. And where did they go? Just Egypt? I mean, they went over into a pyramid or something. Where would they have gone? If you're a refugee, you always go to the capital cities. That's where the work is. And the capital city in Egypt at the time was called Alexandria. And in Alexandria, at 480 or BC, I forget which, but it's around that time, there was a scholar called Philo of Alexandria, Philo. And he did a huge book on the life and times in Alexandria at, I think it was 4 BC. And one of those places he described was a monastery of the Theraputi. And he described it in detail. There were men and women in the monastery of the Theraputi at 4 BC in Alexandria. They were celibate. They had bald heads. And they worshipped the moon days. Apparently, I think if I remember correctly, there's a big wall separating the two sides of the monastery. When I first read that in translation, I thought, that sounds like a Buddhist monastery. Because there was no other tradition of monasticism in Christianity, well, it wasn't any Christianity yet, in Judaism. So where did that come from? And number two is I was so intrigued. One of my fellow monks, he was a Swiss. He was going to see his parents over in Bern in Switzerland, and also he was fluent in ancient Greek. And I asked him, I was senior to him, asked him, can you please, if possible, just go to the library and check out an original of that document by Philo of Alexandria, about the nature of Alexandria. And he did. And he wrote me a lovely letter afterwards. He said, Ajahn Braun, I thought you were crazy. He said that, thinking that this was a Buddhist monastery, but I checked it out in ancient Greek. And he said the word he used was a dead ringer for Buddhist monks and nuns. Dead ringer means yes, exactly, precise. If you know what a Buddhist monk is, because you are one, and you live that life, he was about 7 or 8 years as a monk when he wrote this back to me, and you can read the ancient Greek, the similarities are just outstanding. That was a Buddhist monastery in Alexandria at the time when Jesus was there. No doubt. Because the main route for goods to come from India into Europe was actually along the Gulf of Iran? Well, that part of the Persian Gulf, yeah. They had a couple of stops there, and the reason why the Indians exploited that because they used the monsoon season and the winds to drive their boats, and they were very skilled at that. And so they had a huge trade between India. Now, one of the ports they went to was the old port of Aden, which was called Felix Asiaticus or something at that time. And then from there over to the Red Sea, and they went up the Red Sea so far, and it was Philadelphus Ptolemy in 2nd century BC, built a port there to take that trade, and eventually that went across a very small amount of desert sand to the Nile, from the Nile up to Alexandria. That was the main trade route. Once it was got to Alexandria, then it went all over Europe. That was the main trade route at the time. And even Philo of Alexandria mentioned that they had these ascetics, the therapeutae, but he also said there were thousands more further down south in Europe, south of Egypt. When you first heard that, south of Egypt, there's nothing down there. But south of Egypt, geography was not as sharp or well learned as we have these days. South of Egypt means down south of Egypt and over the Persian Gulf into India. So basically, there was Buddhist monks and nuns over in Egypt at the time Buddha went there. So if the Buddha was interested, Jesus was interested. Where would Jesus have gone? He would have gone down south of Egypt and over to the port of Soparika, just north of Mumbai. And then from there, at that time, the center of Buddhism was run by Kanishka over in Kashmir. That's where we would have gone to learn more about this interesting past. And of course, you all know that one of these English explorers, he broke his leg over in Ladakh, and then he was just messing around in the library, and he found out the manuscript about Issa. Yes, exactly. There's lots of circumstantial evidence there, but pretty convincing when you put it all together. Yes, Buddhism, so in the monastery in Ladakh. Yeah, interesting. But anyway, it doesn't help me answering all the questions. I'm wasting a lot of time. Anyway, so it should be fine. And just encourage your kid to be sharp, to be wise. Bhante, what do you do when one gets nimitta? You told us to enjoy it. What do you mean by this? You know, it's weird that sometimes when you have some happiness and joy which you can't control, it doesn't follow your orders, that gets very scary. You wonder what the heck's going on. So first of all, enjoy, just leave it alone, let it be. Don't try and capture it. Don't try and keep it. Just be in this moment and just enjoy the experience. When you come out, or when that disappears afterwards, that's when you learn so much about this nature of this thing you call yourself and your will. The less you do, the longer it lasts and the more blissful it becomes. It's like when you go to a school and university, every year the exams get tougher and you train to be able to pass the tougher exams. When you get to these steep stages of meditation, like the nimittas, it's not just like watching the breathing. The breathing can be kind of simple to watch. Now this is powerful, and you can face fear. Why do people face fear? Because you have to let go of something to go deeper. Why do people always say that, well, why is it because you take an ice cream from a baby? Why does a baby scream? There's plenty more ice creams in the fridge. But when it's my ice cream and you're about to lose it, that of course causes fear. And very often when you get to these nimitta stages, there's a thing that I'm out of control and you're losing things. What you're losing is not anything important, like your bodily feelings. It's nice when they all go. It's nice when you don't feel your body. But for many people, they get really scared. I remember just one Singaporean who came up to me one day, said, yes, I was meditating, Ajahn Braun, what's going on? I couldn't feel my hands. My hands were disappearing. He was really terrified. There's more of you going to go yet. That's only a start. And isn't it nice when things disappear and vanish? To me it is. I'll tell you another personal story now, to emphasize this point. I'm sorry if I don't finish the questions, but these are important points. There was one time, first year as a monk in Thailand, when we were encouraged to sleep out in the jungle. Even it was like the cold weather, the cold season, about this time, December. And so I slept out just on a piece of a mat, my mosquito umbrella, and the net, the mosquito net. And it was very pleasant. It was kind of weird, but you always felt safe inside that net, and you see snakes slither past. You know, deadly snakes, but for some reason, because you're inside the net And this was a tradition of Buddhism. You never felt scared at all. But one thing I never knew, that there were these little mites in the forest of Bungwai, and if they beat you, they would usually have what's called scrub typhus. And so many of the monks at that time, including myself, were infected with scrub typhus. So you have a very bad fever, shaking. I didn't know what it was, but they sent me to hospital. And had some wonderful experiences in the hospital in Ubon. This was 1974 or 5. That was a third world country at that time in Thailand. And the northeast was the poorest parts of Thailand. And so it was a third world country in a third world hospital. They did have a monk's ward, and it was scary. They had about 6 beds on one side, 6 beds on the other side, and a nurse's station by the entrance. And when it got to 6 p.m., the nurse, a male nurse, disappeared. No other nurse came back. So I had enough knowledge of Thai to ask the monk sitting in the next bed, should we tell somebody the night nurse hasn't come? And he said, what do you mean, night nurse? There never is a night nurse. If things get bad at night time, that's just unfortunate karma. That was not reassuring. And there was a nurse would come twice a day, morning and afternoon, to inject me with a cocktail of antibiotics. And forget about women aren't allowed to touch you, because this was in a hospital, you're really sick. So I had to get over on my front, and she would not inject me. She would stab me. And the reason they had to stab you is because those were the days of recyclable needles. They did, not like these days. Why? I mean, last time I got an injection was for COVID vaccine. And you can hardly feel it. They're so sharp, they only use once. These ones are used so many times, they boil them. I'm sure they have to sharpen them up. Because this was a poor hospital. So, twice a day, bang, bang on the other side in the afternoon. And even though I had lots of loving kindness, not for that nurse. I was only a young monk. May all beings be happy and well, but not her. My backside after a couple of weeks of that is really sore. And then one day Ajahn came to visit me. Oh wow. I was just a small monk, and this was this big superstar monk. Came to visit me, and straight away you were kind of excited, and just he could spend time to visit you in hospital. And everything was just so wonderful until he started speaking. And what he told me was, Bhamawangsa, you'll either get better or you will die. And then he left. That's not what I wanted. What he said was truth, but it was terrible bedside manner. So anyhow, but then what happened? After about 3 or 4 weeks of having a fever, and you just don't have it. It's the lowest energy I've ever had in my life, even these days. I'm old monk now. I was young then. Just even to get up was just almost impossible. There's no one to help here. And hardly any energy left at all. Fever for 3 or 4 weeks. And then, for some reason, I decided, let's meditate. And I could not sit up cross-legged, no way. Just laying where I was, just closing my eyes, and then watching my breath, and getting into a really nice deep meditation. Now that was so beautiful to experience, simply because it was contrasted to this aching, energyless body. And then I don't know how long I was in there, but I'm pretty sure these days that that's where the fever broke and was disappeared. I've seen that too many times with other monks, lesser sicknesses for oneself. There's something weird about these deep meditations. But certainly I was so happy afterwards. And the weirdest thing, and I teach this, personal experience, my posture. In any meditation book, I've never seen the posture that I was in bed, to get a deep meditation. One leg was this way, another leg was the other way, an arm over here, an arm over there. Honestly, the posture that's what my body wanted to do. So lay down like that. And I let go of the body. And when the body vanishes, oh my goodness, don't be afraid. An incredible amount of healing can happen then. And you feel so free and happy. So anyway, what to do when one gets nimitta is just leave it alone. Stay there. Let it develop by itself. Don't be afraid. Don't allow wanting to destroy what you're experiencing. Just stay there. Be a kind of observer, an experiencer, and don't give any instructions. And it usually develops by itself and gets better and better and better. Does that make sense to you? Dear Ajahn, YOLO, you only live once. No way. Just enjoy each moment in life and try out as many things as practice. No regrets. What do you think about the principle of life, YOLO? Is it against the Buddhist principles? It's against reality. Forget about Buddhist principles. Yes, it's against Buddhist principles. It's against truth. It's against Hindu principles. It was even against Christian principles for the first 500 years of Christianity. You don't just live once. If you think like that, when you die, you're going to get a big surprise. The Buddha was right. That's why people can remember past lives. If just one person can prove they remembered their past lives, there's no other way they can get the information from any other source. If one person can, that's been done so many times. Why can't everybody? That'd be really weird if Dr. Victor we can remember his past lives. And, yeah, he was reborn, but no one else. This is a general way of science. I always mention that the Higgs boson they were wanting to find one of these for such a long time. They finally found one about 10 years ago. At least they think they found one. They haven't been able to disprove it yet. And they gave Nobel Prizes out for the researchers. And they only found one. But that proved it exists. Only have to prove one case of rebirth, and then it exists. So don't think YOLO. YOLO is so stupid. Please excuse me. That's one of the points. Ever since I was a kid, before I was a Buddhist, you knew there was such a thing as rebirth. It was obvious to me. Now, how can a person have these characteristics? How can you have a Mozart? How can you have some of these people who tend to do... Look, one of the people, he did a hypnotic regression to find out why, even though he was a kid, he knew how to fly an aircraft. It's ridiculous. How can he know how to fly an aircraft when he was such a young kid? But he did. And so he had this hypnotic regression. And that was done under, Dennis, who used to be our president of Buddhist Society of West Australia some years ago. And that he remembered a previous life of being a pilot during the Second World War. He was Scots, but he was flying this aircraft from Wales to Gibraltar. And he recalled all the details, and the plane crashed in Gibraltar. And the reason it crashed, it was not because it was shot down by enemy aircraft, it was because it had a faulty tail rudder system. And so when it came down to land, basically you couldn't steer the plane, and it crashed. And that's what he said. And I remember that occasion. It obviously explains why he could fly aircraft as a young kid in this life, but it also explains, actually not explains, I also had a free evening, and that evening I went on internet and I keyed in crashes, Second World War, Gibraltar. And it came up straight away. I couldn't believe it. Exactly what I'd heard him say under hypnosis was true. And that really sort of stunned me, that I could get it off the internet so quickly. He remembered it perfectly. Many times that really shows you that rebirth is actually true. There's this other guy, which I remember from my youth. His name was Roy Hudd, Hudd. He was like an entertainer, comedian, and he was often on the TV when I was growing up, kind of like a household name. And one day he wrote this article, which I remember reading, that he was performing in a theatre somewhere in London, and in the evening, once the performance was finished, he got in his car to drive home. But that day, I think the Greater London Council had installed a new one-way system in London, in central London, and he got totally lost. And he was driving around trying to figure out how to get home, and he turned one corner of one street he thought he'd never been in ever before, but he recognized everything about it from his past life. He said it was weird. He started seeing the architecture of these buildings, because in central London, the buildings, you're not allowed to change how they look. You can actually do renovations inside, but not on the outside. And even on that building, there was this blue plaque. If those of you who've been to London, anyone famous or well-known was born there, they put a plaque on it. And then the plaque, his former life, he was called Dan, D-A-N, Leno, L-E-N-O, the most famous music hall performer of his age. And it all just flooded back to him. So he stopped, he knocked on the door of the house where he used to live. Because he was a TV personality at that time, they actually let him in. They knew who he was. Said, "No, Mr. Roy Hudd, what are you doing here?" He said, "I used to live here." "No, you didn't. We've been living in this house for about 20, 30 years. That was about 70, 80 years ago. And he took them for a tour, a guided tour of their own house. This is where the window used to be. And actually you could actually see this, the renovation where it had been done. It was true. But the problem with him, and I thought this was disgusting, the problem with his memory of his previous life, he wrote the article about it. He was just being honest and truthful. In his previous existence, he was an entertainer. In this existence, he was an entertainer. But when he wrote the article, the head of I think it was the second TV channel in UK, had the BBC and the ITV. The head of the ITV, which is who he worked for, was a very devout Catholic. And as soon as he was made aware of this article, well, one of his employees basically sacked him. Didn't give him any more work. And I thought it's kind of disgusting, just because your religion says this and says that. You should have respect for people's ideas and views. But it didn't matter, because then Roy Hudd became an expert and wrote many books on the life of his previous existence, Dan Leno, and what it was like in those days in music hall in London in the 1914s, 15s, 16s, around that area. So that's some of these stories. I don't see why people can't accept rebirth. Sometimes people say, well, there are more people alive today than have probably ever died. How do you explain that, Ajahn? It's obvious. People are not just born human to human again. Even though the human population has increased enormously, the population of primates and other animals have decreased. The number of gorillas have decreased. Now you know where all these Vikings have come from. Very violent people. Human beings and animals are not that different. Years ago, this is yesterday's question, probably. Yesterday's, they've disappeared, thank goodness. But I've lost them. Where are they? Years ago, someone alerted me on the internet again to this parrot, African grey parrot, called Alex, the parrot, Alex, The, parrot, Parrot. He's died now, it's a long time ago. But if you ever have the chance to have a look at it, this African grey parrot was a subject of an experiment by a couple of psychologists who used a way of teaching young intellectually challenged kids how to speak. And they applied that technique to an African grey parrot. The parrots lived for 40 or 50 years before they passed away. They taught this parrot a language. It was English or American, and had enough vocabulary that this parrot could have a conversation with you. It wasn't just pieces of eight or whatever, have a real conversation. And that was spooky. This was not done by Disney, it's not done by AI. This was a real parrot speaking with you. And what really convinced me on one little clip of this parrot, he was having a conversation with the owner. And then the parrot turned around and said, "I'm bored, can I go now?" The parrot was showing emotions, using language just like you would use it. So a parrot can get reborn as a human being. They have the language, they have the emotions, they have the kind of connection. Why not? Okay, anyway, let's actually answer a question. Thank you for the year-end retreats. How to develop the perception of non-delight in the world in Gopakamoggallānasutta. You have to find delight in something. If the mind doesn't find delight, it has no energy. It's wonderful not to find delight in worldly things, but find delight in spiritual things, say. In things like helping out the wisdom park, helping out the BGF, helping out people who are sick. This is not delight in the world. It's delight in something else, which is far more beautiful and noble. And there are so many places which need help. I'm not talking about money. I'm just talking about someone to mow the grass, or someone to help with the food, or someone to be in an old people's home to visit people who are lonely and very, very sick. People who can just show their kindness, wherever that kindness happens to be. And that is where we find great delight. Not in the world, but in kindness and generosity, and in peace as well. That makes sense to you? But if you don't find the happiness there, then you get depressed. That's why it's really important to actually to develop the spiritual happinesses, like meditation, like kindness, like service, like one thing which people hardly talk about, mudita. Mudita is like free happiness. Somebody else has done something amazing. Like somebody else, they come here for the first time, the first retreat they've ever done, and they get second or third jhana. How would you feel? Unfair. I've been coming here for years and years and years, and this young person just walks in, they get second and third jhana straight away. The reason you laugh is because you can understand. Instead of having jealousy when somebody else succeeds, instead we have mudita. Oh, wonderful, well done. Thank you so much for letting us know that it actually works. Mudita, as I call it, free happiness. So you don't have to feel jealousy. The path works and somebody has tasted the fruit of the path. Okay, next question. When a person is doing walking meditation, what should he or she be aware of? Breathing in and out, or aware of their walking posture? What I do when I teach is when you're doing the walking meditation, be aware of your feet moving, of the walking. Otherwise, if you're aware of your breathing, you don't know what you're doing with your feet. You can step on some broken glass, or if you're watching your breath, or if you watch nimittas doing walking meditation, bang into the wall at the other side. So if you're doing walking meditation, be aware of your feet, rising, going forward, and then going down. That's the best. And please never misunderstand the importance of walking meditation. Get very, very still. I was telling people on my 50th birthday anniversary that where I was ordained as a monk was not in Ajahn Chah's monastery, but in Wat Saket, in the middle of Bangkok. And I would always, there was some morning chanting, which I went to diligently, because I had to learn about how to chant. But after the chanting was finished, I did an hour of walking meditation. inside the main hall. Anybody else vanished, they disappeared. And I remember it was 1 hour because they had a grandfather clock in the meditation hall. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. Why they have that in the meditation hall, I just can never understand. But at least they let me know. It always took me 1 hour to walk from one end of the hall to the, half an hour, one end of the hall to the other, turn around half an hour back. And it was just natural. Because once you're just lifting your foot, how many muscles does it take just to lift the foot slightly? And then what happens when the foot separates, or the sole of the foot separates from the carpet? It's very comfortable. And then it moves up and it moves backwards a little bit. And then it moves forward in an arc. This is my feet, the way I walk. And then it goes down. You could experience everything, what was happening with your feet. It was just like I said, you have full awareness of the breath from beginning to end, you don't miss a part of it. That's what I was doing with my feet moving. And I never realized how peaceful I was getting until one day, about 2/3 of the way through the 1 hour session, I heard this weird voice. It was like coming from a huge distance away. I wasn't scared, but like fascinated. What was this? So I paid attention to it. I took my attention away from my feet to this sound. And I realized there was another monk shouting in my ear hole. Shouting. But you were so focused on the feelings in your feet that you experienced it like it was a long distance away. That's a sign of samadhi is happening, the stillness of the mind. And it took me embarrassing a long time. I had to lift up my head. There's so many muscles have to move to lift up your head and turn it around. I'm going fast now. This is super fast compared to what was happening then. And when I got eye contact with him and confirmed it was a young monk, I realized that I had supposed to be going to an appointment, but I'd forgotten about it. And he was sent to come and get me. And he was shouting, trying to get my attention. And I just, even with the best respect, I couldn't move fast. I just looked at him and said, "What?" And unfortunately, this was happening in a monastery in Thailand, where people understood what meditation does. They didn't send me for a psychological checkup. It just took me just a few minutes to get, like in a car, to go up the gears, to normal gear. But the experience stayed with me for a long time. That's what happens in walking meditation. You get very deep and very still. But just watch the feet. That's the most important. Can a person get into jhana while doing walking meditation? Thank you. I always said no. But apparently one of my friends who was in Thailand said he did know one monk who did get into jhana while doing walking meditation. The proof was all the band-aids and bandages on his face. You don't know what you're doing. You've left the body, you're blissing out inside. And you keep on walking until you hit a tree or something. Not recommended. Okay. Dear Ajahn Braun, my IBYO son. Ibyo? Don't understand that. Oh, 16-year-old, not a B. My 16-year-old son used to believe in the Dhamma. Now he believes in ChatGPT. or Google. Who or what is the truth? The Dhamma is the truth. ChatGPT or Google is just a means of either wasting time or finding the truth. It's up to you. It's so hard these days to know. I don't know ChatGPT, but I do know Google. And if you have Google, you always have to be very careful of what website or what app you get onto, because sometimes there's a lot of money to be made in telling lies and deceiving people. So you've got to be careful there. The latest example of that is our ops manager in Perth, that's Leha, that she got an email from some weird source saying that this gentleman, Anand Krishnan, had passed away, and in his will had bequeathed $1.5 million to 10 Buddhist societies. Can you please send us your details so we can see if you're one of them? $1.5 million. Wow. Fortunately, they're smart enough to realize it was a scam. So they checked the website of this organization doing that, and they're well known for scamming people. So you see what happens, the greed. Oh, can Wisdom Park use $1.5 million? So that kind of attracts you. And then you think, well, I know that Ananda Krishna has died. And he wasn't a Buddhist, he was a Hindu, but at least his son was a Buddhist. Who knows? Maybe. And sometimes the greed gets the better of your wisdom. So it's a scam. This 16-year-old boy thinks that religion is for the weaker human. A strong person doesn't need any religion. How to guide him? You can't guide your son. It's up to him to find out from his mistakes. Instead of calling it religion, call it spirituality, call it meditation, call it kindness. But religion's got a bad name in the West. And the reason it's got a bad name is so many examples of religious leaders not doing the right thing, and just being greedy, being indulgent, being sensual. So instead of that, they reject it. But GTP or Google is not any better. So please teach him always to question and to be honest. You can't argue with that. Well, I was told that Vipassana insight meditation is better than Samatha meditation. Is this view correct? Absolutely not. I don't know why people say that. If you want to actually do research onto that, there was a couple of books written recently, and it was on the history of Vipassana, especially the Burmese Vipassana. You remember that one?
I know the author, Erik Braun.
No, somebody else. But anyway, these two scholars, they kind of found out that it was my ancestors' fault. That's why I have to teach in Malaysia and Singapore and many other countries which the British used to rule. My ancestors did such bad karma that I had to pay off some of the debts. This was in Burma. In Burma at that time, the British had just taken over Mandalay. And one of the monks, it was Ledi Sayadaw, L-E-D-I, Sayadaw. He was a very, very good monk, and he thought this could be the end of the Dhamma in Burma. So he said in order to strengthen the Dhamma there, he started promoting this Vipassana meditation. it's easier to do. To get jhanas, they're fantastic, they're worthwhile aiming for, but they're more difficult than insight. How many of you know what Buddhism is? Be honest. You think you do. You can teach Buddhism, you can write books about Buddhism, give lectures on Buddhism. But if you really knew what Buddhism was, you'd at least be a street winner. How many of you can put your hand up and say you're a street winner? I tell this story to the monks sometimes. You know, that the Buddha said, well, I ask you, do you know what the Four Noble Truths are? You say yes, but do you really know? The Buddha said, if you really know what the Four Noble Truths are, you fully know them, you're at least a street winner. Because what happens, we think we know. We know kind of roughly. We haven't really penetrated so deep, you truly know it. And that's one of the problems. So, Vipassana, insight, the real insight is you can't just write a book about Four Noble Truths. You experienced it, you know it that closely, a personal experience. And that is where samatha and vipassana come together. Samatha is like the flashlight or like the lamp. And samatha, vipassana is like the map. You need both the map and the light to find the treasure. One without the other, you will be unsuccessful. The samatha has the task of dispelling the 5 hindrances. They're kind of wiped off for a while. And then you can see. You got on the map exactly where to look. And then you can find out what the truth is. You need both. Always did. What is an expression of samatha? It's the jhanas. Where do you find the jhanas? They are the 8th factor of the Eightfold Path. Sama Samadhi is only described in the suttas by the Buddha as first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. Nothing else. Even in the Gopakamoggallānasutta, there Ananda, just after the Buddha passed away, Ananda was the go-to person. And so they would ask Ananda, what meditation did the Buddha teach? Ananda answered, first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. That's what he answered. So this was actually part of Buddhism at that time. The 8th factor was always the jhanas. Sati was the 7th factor. Both are necessary. But you can't say that one is dispensable. The Buddha never taught a 7-fold path. If he did, I wouldn't bother with doing, I would bother with jhana meditation, it's fun. But you wouldn't need to bother with samatha at all. 8 factors are necessary. That's why one of my favourite sayings, this is from the Dhammapada, verse 372. Nati jhanan apanyasa, panya nati ajayato, yam hi jhanan cha panya cha, sawe nibbana santike. Verse 372, Victor, you don't have to type it out. Go to the central or something, come straight up. What that means, nati jnana panyasa. There's no jhana without wisdom. Second one is no wisdom without jhana, no jhana without wisdom. In the one who has jhana and wisdom, panya and jhana, they are in the presence of nibbana. So way nibbana santike. You do need both of them. The wisdom and the jhana, they come together. Bang! You're enlightened, baby. Please excuse my language, but you want to make sure that people who look at Google and chat GTP can actually talk their language. Okay. Insight, i.e. seeing the three characteristics, anicca, dukkha, anatta, can only be achieved after one gets, not concentration, samadhi, stillness. Is this view correct? It can only be seen if you have the insight and the stillness. Please don't call it concentration. I remember just always feeling that word, concentration, didn't make any sense to me. There's a force of the mind, concentration. Stillness made much more sense. The mind gets so still that nothing moves. And I remember we had this Chinese scholar from Stanford came to visit Jhana Grove in the early years. She would always come for at least a month, maybe 2 months. She was a top scholar at Stanford University in Chinese. And then when I told her about samadhi, in your understanding, just in the Chinese suttas, what does that word mean? And she says straight away, stillness. In the Chinese versions of the suttas, they never translate samadhi as anything like concentration. That word, again, came from my ancestors again, the Brits. I got a lot of hard work to balance all of that. They call it concentration. In the Chinese suttas and the Vinaya, they call it stillness. That makes it far more sustainable. Concentration, you get tired after a while. Stillness, you can maintain for such a long time. And because I was talking about Christianity earlier, that's one of the phrases in the Psalms in Christianity, in their Bible. Be still and know that you are God. That's what it says. And when I first saw that, wow, what's that got to do with Christianity? Be still, and you're like in a Brahma realm. Check it out, it's in Psalms. It makes many of my Christian friends very upset. So, okay, you do need the eightfold path, not just samatha, not just vipassana, even right view, and even just precepts as well, right speech, right action, right livelihood, to be able to see what anicca, dukkha, anatta is. Anyway, next question. Skin is dry due to the aircon and weather. Is it considered breaking precept if we apply some face moisturizer? Not at all. Or you can... No, I'm not going to crack any jokes. That is not breaking the precept. You're not doing that in order to beautify your body. You're doing that to feel comfortable. That's not a problem. I do not want to be stupid. Next life, please allow me to ask a stupid question. May I ask if I give someone wine? If I give someone wine or alcohol as a gift, does this break my precepts? The person receiving is not a Buddhist and doesn't keep 5 precepts. Thank you. So no, it's not breaking the 5 precepts. It's not a wise thing to do. But if you take the precepts, and if you take the alcohol, that's where the breaking of the precepts comes from. But I don't think it's a wise thing to do. And sometimes it's just become habitual, especially at Christmas. Actually, I made a mistake the other day when I told her this story, which I told her the BGF, and it went on the radio the next day, about the guy at the airport having his luggage checked. And when he found it was alcohol in there, he said, "Oh, it's a miracle." That actually wasn't the story I meant to say, but it's still a good story. The real story was the man who went to a Christmas party and he had alcohol there, and he drank a lot, and he didn't know he should have taken a taxi home, but he thought, what's the chances of getting caught? The police are really so busy, they've got other people to catch. The odds of getting caught are just, in my favor. I'm not getting caught, are in my favor. So he drove home. Unfortunately for him, he got caught in a police roadblock. They were checking everybody on that road. If he did a U-turn and tried to escape, that was an admission of guilt. So he had to wait in line. And in those places, it was in New South Wales, I believe. In that place, when it got to his turn, he had to get out of the car. And then they gave him the breathalyzer to breathe into. He knew he was done. He was over the limits. He knew he's going to probably lose his license and get a big fine. But what can you do? So the policeman gave him the breathalyzer tube, and he was just about to breathe into it when there was a big sound of a crash. One of the cars at that roadblock coming into it had gone a little bit too fast and got into the rear end of another car. And the police heard that sound. He took the breathalyzer away and said, "It's more important I deal with this road accident than check your alcohol. Get back in your car and go home." Wow. He thought he was so lucky. He came within seconds of being busted. So the next morning he woke up with a hangover in bed. And when he woke up with a hangover, he woke up because someone was ringing his doorbell. They wouldn't stop. And so he staggered to the door, opened it, and he saw 2 New South Wales policemen standing outside. Straight away he thought, they can't arrest me now. I'm not driving. So he relaxed and said, "How can I help you, officers?" And all they did was say, "Would you mind, sir, if we have a look inside your garage?" I said, "Yeah, sure, no problem. I'm not a thief. I don't store stolen goods in there. Sure you can." So he went over to the garage and opened it. And when he opened his garage, he almost had a heart attack. Because in his garage, it wasn't his car there. There was a police car. When they said, "Get in your car and drive home," he was so drunk, he got in the wrong car. He drove one of theirs home. They soon traced had an extra car at the roadblock, they were missing one of theirs. So be careful. Oh, you wouldn't do anything like that. Okay. Yes, I don't know what question that was. Okay. Let's get this one up. There's one. Oh, crikey, that's the wrong one. Okay, yes, that's the Christian one. Okay. This is a second special question for a monk who was a special question for a monk who was a physicist from Cambridge. Does all human manusa in this earth does all humans in this earth only, or human maybe in other parts of the universe, both on scientific or Buddha Dhamma perspective? There are human beings in other, not actually on this earth. I know there's about a couple over in the space lab orbiting Earth. They're supposed to come back to Earth, but they haven't got a lift yet to get back. Those are the only ones I know. You know, once there was that story of this monk. He developed the power to levitate. It's in the suttas. And he was really good at it. So one day he decided to actually really go for it. He left the planet Earth, and he kept on going and going and going to try and find out where this universe ends, to go to the end of the universe. Surprise, surprise, he died on the way. His name was Rohitassasutta, I believe. And after he died, you know, that when he got reborn, or reborn as a spirit or something, then he went to ask that question of the heavenly beings, one stage after another. And then eventually he got to this very high heavenly realm, and he said, we don't know, but there's Brahma, the great God. You know, he should know where this universe finishes without remainder. But you know, I remember this part because it ties into things I've been teaching you. They said, but every now and again a big light appears and Mahabrahma comes out of that light, like nimittas. And so he waited for a little while, and then Mahabrahma came out of this light, and this spirit, who used to be a monk, sort of asked Mahabrahma, you know, where does the universe end without remainder? And Mahabrahma said, I am God, the great God, the Almighty, the All-Knowing, the Creator. Yes, I know, but where does the universe finish without remainder? And then God said again, I am the great God, the Creator. That's what he said before, but where does the universe? I am the great God. But can you answer my question? And that's when the God actually, Mahabrahma took Rohitassasutta aside and said, I don't know. But I didn't want to let you know what other people were listening. And he said, but you're a stupid monk. You know, there's someone who does know. Now it's called the Buddha. Why didn't you go and ask him? And then so this spirit went to see the Buddha, and the Buddha said, the universe ends within this fathom-long body and mind. That's where that saying comes from. Not out there, but in here. I thought it was a really nice story. Anyway, the last question, oh no, it's this question here. The hand phone, good, yeah, oh, good. The last question from yesterday. I read somewhere in the biography of Luang Por Man that he was visited by past Buddhas and others upon reaching enlightenment. But I thought after gaining enlightenment they are gone from the world. So how is this possible? Excellent. It's impossible. That could not have happened. And that's caused a lot of controversy. And it doesn't matter who says it, it can't happen. So, one of the reasons for that is that no one actually knows if Ajahn Mun actually said that, but there was a translator would add that. And when one of Ajahn Mun's other disciples, called Lumpu Tate, Ajahn Tate, when he read that, he was so upset in the sense of, that's not right, Ajahn Mun never said that Ajahn Tate wrote his own biography. He wrote his own biography to make sure that people don't exaggerate or add their own interpretations. And that's what he did. So basically that is not true. Cannot happen. Right? Sorry? Oh no, really? Okay, what that one? Done this once?
No, this I think. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's one answered already. Yes, good. That's one to answered. Only 29 questions here. The answer to the first question is yes. The answer to the second question is no. The third question is maybe. All done. No. I'll do a few of them and see what happens. Sukhi Hotu Ajahn. Very good. May I be happy. What is Ajahns view, first as a Buddhist monk and meditator, and second as a theoretical physicist, of the physics experiment called the double-slit electron or light experiment? That was very close to me, because the person who did that got the inspiration from that at the college I went to, Emmanuel College, the double-slit experiment. He was watching the pond, and he saw just how diffraction happened. It's not an anomaly. Double-slit experiment means that sometimes, like light especially, or electrons, they can sometimes act like a wave, sometimes as a particle. The anomaly of the presence of the intention to observe, defies all scientific basis and logic, does it? This is what I like in quantum physics, is to make it even more interesting, Schrödinger's cat experiment. Erwin Schrödinger was one of the founders of quantum physics. And he was an interesting man because he was in Germany during the Second World War. People were a bit afraid of him, that he could had enough understanding of everything, that he could be able to help the Third Reich, the German military, also create an atom bomb. But actually, he was working for the French resistance. First of all, after the Second World War, when he was arrested as a collaborator, and then they actually found out all that time he was using his wisdom to make sure that they never developed that bomb. He actually stopped its development. A really courageous man. But anyway, his Schrödinger's cat experiment, brilliant. It was not done, it was called a thought experiment. He said, suppose you put a cat, a healthy cat, not one of these, but a real cat, and put it in a box. And in the box, there's a cyanide capsule. And there's also a cesium atom. If that cesium atom decays, it will break the cyanide capsule and the cat will be poisoned. It's only a thought experiment. He never actually did it. He wanted actually to show an anomaly in physics, and the fault is only our perception is too narrow. We need to expand the way we look at the world. So, and there's a 50% chance of that cesium atom decaying and the cat being poisoned to death. 50% will be alive. You can't see the cat, it's shut in this box. So just after that 50% time has passed, you haven't opened the box. Is that cat alive or dead? And you may think this is ridiculous, but this is the correct answer, been verified many times. The cat is not alive or dead. It's in the third state. Quantum probability. These days, we're getting very close to having functioning quantum computers. That's just basically how they work. It doesn't make any sense to you, but it's actually the truth. So what happens is our understanding of the world is what's at fault. We need to expand that understanding. Let's say another thing. I've already mentioned this to you. How about the size of the universe? How big is the universe? It is finite volume. There's this theory years and years ago, but no one can ever find any fault with it. Obelisk paradox. If the universe was infinite, there would be infinite light everywhere. That's a summary of it. It's easy to prove this universe isn't infinite. So where's its edge? It doesn't have an edge. It's curved. Whichever way you travel. Have you ever thought that Malaysia was the center of the universe? There's some truth to that. If you go in a sort of a space transport, spaceship, and you go dead straight in that direction, you don't turn left, don't turn right, you come straight back to here, to Wisdom Park. By that time, it all decayed by then. But nevertheless, you come back where you started. The universe is like a ball, but curved in the fourth dimension, not just 3 dimensions. Sometimes, when I was listening to some of this stuff being taught at Cambridge, you knew it was true. But you thought, wow, this is mind-boggling. But soon you got used to it and understood. It's one of the reasons why a lot of times people's wisdom is not that they're hearing something untrue. You do need to expand your framework of knowing to allow these truths to actually to come in. That's why sometimes people object to rebirth. How can that happen? When you expand your wisdom, you find it does happen. Same with Schrödinger's cat. The third interpretation. It's neither dead nor alive. As soon as you see, open the box, and the mind comes in, you know something, then it collapses the Schrödinger equation, as they used to say. And the truth as we know it happens. Before then, it's like a third truth. Weird, you may not agree with what I say, but actually that's pretty close to the truth. Welcome to our world. What is Ajahn view first? Oh, I did that one already. This is the anomaly on the presence of the intention to observe defies all scientific basis and logic. No, it's actually true. You do experiment after experiment. First of all, you know it's true. Then why is it true? The why sometimes defies our understanding for a while. That's the same thing with diseases like cancer and other weird diseases. Why is it the case that tumours disappear just almost overnight through meditation? And that's happened. Why? Even I would love to know why that happens, but you've seen it happen so many times. You believe the evidence, not just the theory. As one philosopher once said, you have to accept the truth of rebirth. You see, a person over here can remember accurately what he was before and how he was before, and that's true. How does that happen? He said, the philosopher said, I don't know how it happens, but I know it does. That's what proof is. Will I convince you? Well, don't worry, if you don't believe in rebirth in this lifetime, you will in your next. And the reincarnation is making a comeback. That's another joke. Okay, you still? Okay, I better finish these, otherwise you'll be reincarnated before. Okay, we'll get to the next question. Is there a possibility for a practicing Buddhist to be reborn in an Islamic, non-Buddhist country in her next life, where there is no Dhamma teaching at all? Thank you. It's kind of unlikely, but if you do, you can always migrate. There was hardly any Buddhist teaching in England when I was born. I don't know why I did that for. Kind of crazy. But there's always that possibility to move. Ajahn Brahm, after our loved one passed away for many years, why do we still dream about them? There's many reasons for dreams. Sometimes you remember them. And sometimes that memory comes into a dream. It doesn't mean they're trying to contact you. Sometimes people ask me that. They say they dreamt of their loved one, and it was many years ago they passed away. Why? Sometimes they're not asking for help, they're trying to help you. Sometimes the beings like that Ghaṭīkārasutta. Ghaṭīkāra was the friend of Siddhartha Gautama in a previous life. And he came to congratulate his friend, fellow villager. When Siddhartha Gautama got enlightened, became our Buddha, he came up to him and said, we were friends together in our previous life, the same village. He said, you became Buddha, I'm a non-returner, because they both were disciples of Kassapa the Buddha. If you haven't seen that yet, it changes a lot of the way you understand the progress from life to life of a Buddha. And you can't question it, it's just confirmed, it's got other sources confirm it. Does it mean that he or she is not reborn yet? No, it doesn't mean that. They can be reborn in first of all, it may not be them, it may be just a memory of them. And second, if it really is them, then a lot of times they could have been reborn in a heavenly realm, and they've just come to check up on you, make sure you're okay. So, if you dream about them, it's nice sometimes when a person has just passed away. And then, for a good example of that, many years ago in Thailand, there was one of the daughters of our treasurer of Wat Pah Nanachar passed away from cancer. She dealt with it really, really well. She was a very inspiring woman. But eventually she died of the cancer. And I remember just trying to teach her meditation and stuff. She's a really good woman. But then also remember just attending the funeral service for this woman. And a week or two later, a few weeks later, the treasurer himself came really early one morning to our monastery, Wat Banana Chat, and I was up early, and I sort of received him, the treasurer, and what's up, can I help? And he said he got on the very, very, very first transport early in the morning because somebody had really spooked him the night before, actually the morning, because at breakfast, when everybody was sitting around on the floor having their breakfast in an Asian style, one of his other daughters just mentioned casually, "Oh, I had a strange dream last night of my deceased sister." She came up to me and said, "It's time now, I have to leave. I've come to say goodbye. I'm taking my leave." When she said that, everybody else in the house, about 15 or 16 people around this breakfast, they stopped eating. And one by one, they repeated, they had exactly the same dream of night. This girl had come to say goodbye to them, been around long enough. And of course, because I had done all of the ceremonies for her while I was there, then I actually checked out something, hey, this is interesting. I checked out the day she died and the day she came to say goodbye was exactly 49 days. You've heard that tradition before? Yes. After 49 days, then they leave? Exactly. So it was kind of weird, confirmation. That's my scientist in me. They're trying to find out, is this actually true? And that was the case, totally true. So anyway, sometimes you dream about them, they're just trying to give you some information. So sometimes it's just a dream, that's all. We dream of many, many things. I often tell people, if you dream that same dream 2 or 3 nights in a row, then they're probably trying to contact you for some reason. Make sense? Okay. Oh, now you're talking about interesting stuff. What type of ghost or spirit I love ghost stories. That was one of the things which I did as a theoretical physicist, Buddhist, astronomer. The other society I joined was Psychic Research Society. And so did one of my best friends at that time. That was Bernard Carr. We used to go ghost hunting together. And he became a very close offsider, a close collaborator with Stephen Hawkins. So Stephen Hawkins even attended his wedding to marry this, the wife of Bernard. And so they were that close together. That's why I get all the inside information about Stephen Hawkins. But they were also ghost hunters. Why did someone like Bernard Carr is now Emeritus Professor of Theoretical Physics at Queen Mary College in London University? That's a very, very highly respected professor. And he's also hunting ghosts. Why would he do that? It's because this is part of our natural world. We want to find out, is there any truth in this? And one of our co-collaborators, he was the head ghost hunter of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. He had this wonderful business card, Dr. Tony Cornell, Cornell. He's now a ghost himself now, he passed away. But it's a brilliant business card he had. And every now and again, if there was any record of any hauntings in UK or anywhere in the world, he would be the one who investigated it. And he had a good sense of humor, but he was also just very meticulous. He'd always go to any suspected hauntings with a professional magician. Because a professional magician do all the tricks. And sometimes Dr. Cornell, he was just a scientist, he couldn't really understand how you could get like pieces of rice to go through a coin. That's impossible, but the conjurer could actually show him how it was done. It was just a trick of perception. So we'd always go to potential hauntings with a conjurer who knew all those tricks, so he could dismiss those and get to real weird stuff. What type of ghost or spirit or unseen beings are the scariest that you have ever met? Especially in Thailand forest, because Thailand's famous for its black magic. Okay, in your ghost story. This is not a joke, I'd have lots of funny stories about ghosts. But when I was in my Tudong year, 5 years I'd been a monk, and then I was walking, after 5 years as a monk, from Ubon, that's Ajahn Chah's monastery, to Sakonnakhon, that's this wonderful monk Ajahn Ben's monastery. And it was going to take about 3 or 4 weeks. I was in no rush, I was going slowly. And on the way, it came to the full moon night, and that's the kind of night you always want to go into a monastery, to do your patimokkha precepts, do some meditation. And this was in a monastery called, Tamsi Gao Monastery, Ajahn Suwat. He was a very well-known monk, Ajahn Suwat, another disciple of Ajahn Mun. So I went there for the night, actually 2 nights, and then in the morning, time to go, the patimokkha ceremony was over, and I asked him, look, I'm going to Sakonnakhon, it's about 60 kilometers. Are there any caves on the way? Because I love staying in caves. And he said, this was like a senior forest monk. He said, yes, there is a cave on the way, but be careful. There is a ghost, a spirit in that cave, and it sent a couple of monks crazy. Make sure you're strong enough in your meditation. And I thought, wow, confirmation, from a senior monk, Ajahn Suwat, that there is a ghost in this cave. I'm going for it. So I walked to the village and asked one of the lay people. I got there in good time. He said, I want to stay in that cave. You sure? Yes. And so he took me inside. It's a beautiful cave. On the outside of the cave, there was a spring, so there's plenty of water available. And inside the cave was one of these very old Buddha statues. That cave had been used for decades or centuries by wandering monks. And that Buddha statue would probably be worth a fortune in Sotheby's. But there's no way you're going to move it. But then when I went inside, there was a little platform you could sleep on. And the villager warned me, if you go deeper into that cave, there's a skeleton, a human skeleton. He never said what happened to it. But then he disappeared as fast as he could. He was leaving me there. So I just quickly had a quick wash because I was dirty, and filled up my water bottle and sat there. Sat on the bench, waiting for the ghost. Honest. I always wanted to see a Thai ghost. I was interested. I was a scientist. So I was sitting there waiting for a couple of hours. I've been walking all day, 30 kilometers or so. I was tired, I was hot, and the ghost never turned up. And I was disappointed, honestly frustrated. The monk said there was a ghost here, everything was supporting that. There was an old Buddha statue, a skeleton deeper in the cave, and said, you haven't turned up. That's not acceptable. But I was too tired to carry on. So I lay down. It was pitch black. As soon as I lay down, something came running right towards me. And so there's a sound of a human running. And they stopped right in front of where I was laying down. I wasn't asleep yet, I've only just laid down. Stopped right in front of me. And my reaction, I've been waiting for you for 2 hours, and now you decide to come? Get out of here. And that was it. Then I fell asleep after another 5 or 10 minutes. Ghosts need to be put in their place. I was a monk, they should pay respects. Instead of waiting till the last minute to show up. And that was true, that's what happened. The following day, I think the ghost was ashamed, so I never saw him again. Okay, do you want the last ghost story? Okay, the fun one? Okay.
But before that, just curious, you spoke to the ghost in Thai or in
Yes, in Eastern language, that's northeast. By that time I was fluent. So anyhow, this ghost story. Please tell me if you've heard the story of the vertical ghost going bump, bump, bump. You know that one? Okay, so I won't say that one, I'll say this one instead. Similar, but not the same. This guy had just been listening to a Dharma talk, so he decided, no, time to go home. And this time it was also a shortcut through the cemetery. And this time, as he was walking through the cemetery, he heard the sound. Chip, chip. Chip. Chip, chip. It was a strange sound. He had a flashlight, so he turned the flashlight in the direction of the sound. And then he saw what it was. It was quite a natural explanation. There was a workman who was actually chipping away at one of the headstones in the cemetery. But the man couldn't help himself but ask, why are you chipping away at that headstone so late at night? And the man turned around and said, because somebody spelt my name wrong. Okay, I got quite a few to answer tomorrow. So anyway, we're calling it a night now, it's 9:30. Be careful when you're walking. Chip, chip, chip. Okay, thank you for your patience.